2 summers ago, I declared war on the ants marching across my kitchen counter, and I did it the way every overconfident gardener does. I bought a fogger, sprayed the visible pheromone trail, and felt like a hero for about 6 hours. Then they came back. Same counter, same crack in the tile, same single-file parade, except now there were more of them, like I'd just rung a dinner bell. That's when my neighbor, a retired chemistry teacher named Earl, walked over with a box of 20-mule Team Borax and a look of mild disappointment. He told me I'd been fighting this all wrong, and then he stood in my kitchen for 20 minutes explaining stomach poisons to me while my coffee went cold. Borax is a naturally occurring mineral, sodium tetraborate, and you've probably had a box of it in your laundry room for years without ever thinking of it as a weapon. It costs about $2 at most grocery stores, sits on the same shelf as the stain remover, and almost nobody who owns a box has ever used it for this. But mixed the right way, it becomes one of the most effective pest treatments available, and the way most people use it is almost exactly backwards. It works especially well on sugar-feeding species like odorous house ants, Argentine ants, and little black ants, which are the ones most likely to be marching across your kitchen counter in the first place. Here's the part that surprised me. Spraying ants, or sprinkling borax powder directly on them, barely does anything to the colony. It kills the few ants you can see and leaves the other 99% of the nest completely untouched, including the queen, who never leaves home. Earl told me to picture an ant colony like an apartment building, and the ants on your counter are just the ones who happen to be on the balcony. To actually collapse the building, you need the ones on the balcony to carry something back inside. This works because of a process called trophallaxis, which is the way ants share food mouth to mouth, passing it from forager to forager until it eventually reaches the queen and the larvae deep in the nest. Borax, once an ant eats it, acts as a slow stomach poison. It disrupts their digestion just enough that they don't die immediately. They get sick over a day or two, which sounds like a small distinction, but it's the entire mechanism. A fast poison only kills the messenger, while a slow one lets the message get delivered first. Now, borax and boric acid are related but not the same thing. Boric acid is more refined and technically more potent, but borax dissolved in sugar water creates a more palatable bait that ants are actually willing to carry home, which is the whole point. A lot of people search for one when they mean the other, so it's worth knowing the difference before you go shopping. So the recipe Earl gave me was almost insultingly simple. 3 parts sugar to 1 part borax, dissolved into warm water, soaked into a few cotton balls, and left on a jar lid near the trail. Not sprayed, not sprinkled, just sitting there like a vending machine that only ants know about. That ratio, by the way, works out to roughly a 5% borax solution by weight, which is exactly the concentration range professional pest control operators use when they talk about slow-acting bait, for the same reasons Earl was explaining to me over cold coffee. For the first day, nothing happened, and I remember thinking Earl had sent me on a fool's errand, and I almost went back to the fogger. Then on day 2, the cotton balls were covered, completely swarmed, more ants than I'd seen in the whole previous month combined, all crowded onto 2 soggy cotton balls like it was the only restaurant in town. My instinct was to panic and wipe them all up with a paper towel, but Earl, watching from his porch with what I can only describe as the patience of a man who has seen this exact mistake 1,000 times, told me to leave them alone. "Just walk past it," he said. "Pretend you don't see it." By day 4, the trail was gone. Not thinner, gone. The colony had collapsed from the inside somewhere behind my wall, and I hadn't sprayed a single thing. Now, here's where I have to slow down for a second, because if you searched for this, you've probably seen the claim that borax is banned in 19 states, and I want to be straight with you about that, because it's the kind of thing that sounds true right up until you actually check it. It's not true, at least not the way it's usually presented. Borax itself is registered with the Environmental Protection Agency as a pesticide active ingredient under federal law, and pest control products containing it are sold legally across the country in every state right now, probably within walking distance of wherever you're watching this. What does vary is that individual states can layer their own registration requirements on top of the federal one under a part of the law called FIFRA Section 24C. That means a specific commercial product might need extra state-level paperwork in one place versus another, the same way a car might need different emissions stickers depending on which state it's registered in. That's a regulatory technicality involving paperwork for manufacturers, not a ban, and it's a considerably less exciting headline than the one that probably got you here. What is true, and worth taking seriously, is that borax is genuinely toxic if you eat enough of it. It's not a seasoning you can be casual with, and it's not something you sprinkle around like flour. The European Union actually reclassified borax back in 2010 over concerns about reproductive harm at high exposure levels, and that's part of where some of this dangerous chemical reputation comes from. It's a real classification based on real toxicology, just aimed at a different kind of exposure than a hidden cotton ball. For a cotton ball on a jar lid, tucked behind your stove, away from kids and pets, the actual day-to-day risk is low. But for a toddler, finding an open container and treating it like a snack, it's a real problem. So take all of this as a reason to think about placement, not as a reason to panic, and not as a reason to dismiss it either. Earl, for what it's worth, kept his under the sink in an old coffee can with a lid, which felt like overkill until I thought about it for more than 5 seconds. The ratio matters more than people think, too, and this is the part most people get wrong even when they've heard of the borax trick. Go too strong, say a 20% borax mix, and you get a fast-acting poison that kills the worker ant on your counter before she ever makes it home. That feels satisfying in the moment, since you see dead ants and assume it's working, but it's also completely useless, because the queen never finds out you were even there. And in a week, you're right back where you started, possibly with a second fogger in your cart. The whole strategy depends on the worker surviving just long enough to share the bait, which is why the slow, weak, almost boring version of this recipe is the one that actually works. 3-to-1 sugar-to-borax. Write it down, because you will absolutely convince yourself later that more borax means more dead ants, and you will be wrong in exactly the way I was wrong, standing in my kitchen with a fogger in one hand. One thing worth mentioning, if the same recipe doesn't seem to be working after a few days, it might be a species issue. Carpenter ants and some pharaoh ant colonies, for example, often switch to protein-heavy foraging, especially in spring, and sugar bait barely registers to them. For those, you can adapt the same basic approach by swapping the sugar water for a small amount of peanut butter mixed with borax instead. Same slow poison principle, different bait. Diatomaceous earth is another option people reach for, though it works through a completely different mechanism, physical rather than chemical, and it won't do anything for the colony the way this will. This whole approach of matching the treatment to the pest behavior rather than just spraying and hoping is essentially what pest control professionals call integrated pest management. And the borax bait method is a textbook example of it done right. It took about a week total for that colony to disappear from my kitchen. And another ant problem showed up at the back door the following spring, which I solved in about the same amount of time with the same $2 box. Earl never did get his 20 Mule Team box back, by the way. It's still sitting under my sink, mostly full, next to a sticky note that just says 3-to-1 in my own handwriting, in case I ever forget again, which apparently I do, every single spring.